Imagine growing up thinking the people who are supposed to love you hate you instead. Imagine watching them choose someone else, leaving you abandoned, powerless, forgotten. And then, years later, fate gives you a chance to make them pay. If you've ever been betrayed, disrespected, or underestimated, hit like, subscribe, and brace yourself for a story about pure, calculated revenge and the satisfaction that only comes when justice is finally served. It all began in 1990, a time when the world was wide and terrifying, but I had the illusion of safety. I had just stepped out of middle school, a nervous teenager with acne, awkward limbs, and a desperate need for guidance from my father. My sister, younger and trusting, clung to me as if I could shield her from the storm I hadn't yet realized was coming. And then my father met someone new. Not just someone new, his third wife. They met at the only gas station in our small town, a lonely outpost where the fluorescent lights flickered and the pumps always smelled faintly of gasoline and despair. He fell for her quickly, moved in with her impulsively, and left my sister and me to fend for ourselves in a damn basement apartment. I remember the first night he didn't come home. I stared at the ceiling, tracing the cracks, imagining every possible disaster that could befall us. The sound of dripping water from the pipes and the walls became a constant reminder. No one was watching over us. He didn't leave a note. He didn't leave instructions. He just vanished. From that point, our lives became a routine of absence and scarcity. He would appear every other week, hand me $40 for groceries, and disappear again. $40. It wasn't enough. Not even close. I would stretch it, rationing peanut butter and bread while my sister slept in the corner, her small hands clasped as if praying we'd see him again. The physical sensations of betrayal were almost unbearable. My stomach knotted, my chest felt hollow, and every day the basement felt colder. The air smelled of mildew and decay. But worse than that was the smell of rejection, of being left behind. I realized, even at 12, that the person who was supposed to protect me had chosen someone else over me. Eventually, someone discovered the truth. Someone noticed that a middle schooler and an elementary schooler were living in what was effectively neglect. My mom came to retrieve us, whisking us into what I thought would be a haven. But instead of relief, it was another form of instability. The air was heavier, the arguments more frequent. And my sister and I learned that sometimes a safe place could feel worse than none at all. Then came the lie that almost broke me. After marrying his new wife in 1991, my father's new life was set. And one day, I received a call that made my chest tighten so hard I thought I couldn't breathe. It was her shanty wife. "Your dad's brain tumor has returned. He can't handle the stress of being around you. The only people he can bear are me and Shorty." Shorty, her son, was my age. She painted a picture of a father too weak, too fragile, and too selective to tolerate his real children. I called him, trembling, my voice caught in my throat. "Dad, is this true?" I whispered, desperate for the truth. "No," he said flatly. "It's a lie." I can't believe she would say that. I just can't. I should have felt relief. Instead, I felt confusion, betrayal, and rage all at once. I realized then that our lives weren't just disrupted, they were manipulated. The person who was supposed to love me, protect me, defend me, had allowed someone else to rewrite reality. That was the last conversation we had for decades. The years that followed were hard. Life became a test of survival. College was a patchwork of late-night shifts, dorms I could barely afford, and nights sleeping in my car when money ran out. I learned independence the hard way, but it came with a heavy cost. The sense of being unwanted and overlooked never left me. And yet, in those years, I also grew resilient, cunning, and strategic. I wasn't just surviving, I was learning how to protect myself, emotionally and practically. I built a career. I built a home. I created a life worth living. And all the while, a quiet ember of rage smoldered inside me, waiting for the right moment. I heard snippets about my father over the years, bits of gossip from distant relatives I had cut contact with. He had bought a house. He had enrolled Shorty in vocational classes. He had rebuilt a life without us. A life that seemed normal to everyone else but hollow to me. Sometimes I imagine what my life could have been growing up in that house. Being his son, sharing holidays and birthdays with him. The fantasy made my stomach turn. Instead of warmth, I felt grief, anger, and a hunger for justice that I didn't yet know how to satisfy. Then, almost 3 decades later, fate intervened. October 2019, my uncle Alan called. The voice on the phone was measured, cautious. Your dad is in a nursing home in another state. Shorty ghosted him. He might need your help. 20 minutes from my house. The coincidence was almost laughable, but I felt a spark of something darker than coincidence, opportunity, an opening to see the life they had stolen, to finally confront the consequences of their choices, and maybe to tip the scales of justice. I didn't know it yet, but when I drove to that nursing home, I wasn't just visiting a father I hadn't spoken to in decades. I was stepping into a psychological battleground, a world of hoarding, theft, neglect, and hidden resentment. And I was about to become the storm he and Shorty never saw coming. For years, I told myself the best revenge was living well. I told myself that success, stability, and happiness were the ultimate comeback. But when I saw how far they had gone, how they had squandered everything, I realized surviving wasn't enough. Surviving was just the beginning. After the last bitter conversation with my father, life became a series of small victories over a world that had already dealt me some brutal hands. I moved from one town to another, chasing opportunities, learning to sleep anywhere, eat anything, and carry the weight of disappointment without breaking. College became both sanctuary and battlefield, sometimes literally sleeping in my car. Between shifts, every cold concrete floor, every caffeine-fueled all-nighter, every scraped paycheck was a reminder I could survive, I could endure, and I could thrive, even when no one else believed in me. And thrive I did. I clawed my way to a good job, a stable income, and eventually a family I loved fiercely. Every achievement felt like a quiet middle finger to the people who had left me in that basement, forgotten and unloved. But despite the successes, my mind always wandered to Shorty and Shanty Wife, the two people who had taken everything my father and I should have shared and twisted it into something grotesque. I heard bits and pieces of their lives through family whispers. My grandmother passed away, and the stories were horrifying. Shorty and Shanty Wife showed up at her funeral in a beat-up truck and stripped the house bare, taking everything that wasn't nailed down or even things that were, if they could carry them. Furniture, mementos, even a few sentimental knickknacks. They left nothing behind. It was infuriating, of course, but it also became strangely clarifying. They were careless, arrogant, and greedy, traits that would later become crucial in my plan. Shorty, the golden child, was trusted to manage my dad's affairs. And what did he do? He mismanaged, lied, and built a fragile house of cards on a foundation of entitlement. Every rumor, every small detail I gathered painted the same picture. Shorty was stupid, lazy, and entirely convinced he was untouchable. Meanwhile, I worked, saved, and quietly prepared for life. I learned to be strategic, to observe, to calculate. Every hardship became a lesson, every insult a training ground. The rage simmered under the surface, coiling tighter each year. It wasn't about immediate revenge, it was about precision, timing, and making sure every step would hit with maximum impact. I often imagined walking into Shorty's life as an unstoppable force. I pictured the chaos I could create, the sweet satisfaction of dismantling the world they had built on lies and theft. But for a long time, it remained fantasy. After all, he was still out there, still untouchable, still arrogant. I had no real leverage until October 2019. I got a call from my Uncle Alan. His voice carried a mix of guilt and curiosity. But more than that, he sounded hesitant. Your dad's in a nursing home. Shorty has disappeared. He might need your help. I froze mid-step. Shorty was gone? The golden child, the inheritor of everything, vanished when my father needed him most. And conveniently, this nursing home was just 20 minutes from my house. The thought hit me like a jolt of electricity. This was no coincidence. This was fate lining up with opportunity. And for the first time in decades, the fire in my chest roared to life. This was my chance to see the life they had stolen from me, to confront the aftermath, and to plant the seeds of a revenge that would be surgical, complete, and utterly satisfying. I didn't know what I would find when I arrived, but I knew one thing. The first step had to be observation. I needed to see the aftermath of their negligence and entitlement, to witness the chaos they had sown and begin planning the destruction. The nursing home visit was underwhelming in its normalcy. My father, frail and bound to his bed, barely recognized me. But what he did reveal set the stage for everything. Shorty, the golden child, had vanished, leaving my father alone, anxious and terrified of what might happen next. The house. Oh, the house. My first visit was like walking into a nightmare frozen in time. Overgrown grass blocked the front entrance. Trash-strewn pickup trucks lined the driveway, one even perched on 4 flat tires. Inside, the hoarding reached a grotesque crescendo. Rotting boxes stacked to the ceiling, broken toys, moldy furniture, clothing piles, and the unmistakable stench of decay. I took a deep breath and tried not to gag. Every step I took, every glance through a grimy window, fueled the rage simmering inside me. This was the tangible proof of their carelessness, arrogance, and greed. It was all laid bare before me, and it was perfect. From that day, a plan began to form in my mind. Every injustice, every stolen dollar, every lie would be methodically unraveled, and I would be the instrument of that reckoning. I sat in my car that night, staring at the twisted, hoarded mess of a life that had been built on someone else's suffering. My hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles whitened. I felt a cocktail of fury, anticipation, and deep satisfaction. This wasn't just about money or possessions, it was about justice, about reclaiming control over decades of pain. I could walk away, I thought. I could let it go. I have a family, a career. I've survived. Isn't that enough? But it wasn't. I realized that survival alone was passive. True justice required action. And in that moment, I made a silent vow. Shorty would pay. Not in whispers or regrets, but in tangible, life-altering consequences. I spent the rest of that night researching power of attorney laws, elder abuse statutes, biohazard cleanup companies, small-town banking protocols. I didn't sleep much, but I didn't need to. The adrenaline and fury kept me awake, focused, and meticulous. Every detail mattered. Every observation of their incompetence became a building block for my plan. The greed, the laziness, the arrogance, these were my weapons, and I would wield them with precision. Sitting in that nursing home room, watching my father lie there frail, bedbound, confused, I expected to feel something. Guilt, sadness, closure. I felt none of it. What I felt instead was clarity, cold, sharp, almost peaceful. This man was my father biologically, but he hadn't been a dad in any meaningful sense for over 30 years. And now, in a way that felt almost poetic, the people he chose over his real children had abandoned him too. Shorty, the golden child, the replacement son, the one who got the house, the money, the attention had vanished. And suddenly, I was the only one left standing. He didn't apologize. He didn't ask how I'd been. He didn't acknowledge the decades of silence. All he said was, "Can you drive to the house and check on things?" That was it. No remorse, no reflection, just entitlement. I agreed, not because I cared, but because curiosity is a dangerous thing. I wanted to see it, The life he chose instead of us. The house where birthdays were celebrated without me. The walls that heard laughter I was never part of. What I found wasn't a life. It was a crime scene. The closer I got to the house, the worse it became. The grass was knee-high, choking the walkway. You couldn't even see the front door from the street. The driveway looked like a junkyard, 3 pickup trucks sitting at odd angles. 2 of them literally stuffed to the windows with trash. Not tools, not work equipment, trash, bags, clothes, mail, random debris. My dad's handicap had died. SUV sat off to the side on 4 completely flat tires, also filled with garbage. It looked abandoned. Because it was. I didn't have a key, so I walked the property, peering through windows, taking photos. Inside was worse. So much worse. The house was hoarded beyond anything I'd ever seen. Floor-to-ceiling chaos. Mold, rot, piles of boxes, collapsing under their own weight. The smell seeped through the walls, old food, animal waste, something dead. On the front door and the carport door were dozens of notices from the city. Red tags, warnings, condemnation threats. One letter in the mailbox calmly stated that because the house was considered abandoned, mail delivery had been suspended. That night, I didn't sleep. I researched power of attorney, fiduciary responsibility, elder abuse, banking oversight, and somewhere around AM, something inside me hardened. This wasn't just neglect. This was theft. The next day, I showed my father the photos. I didn't soften them. I didn't explain. I just handed him my phone and watched his face change. He ranted. He threatened to beat Shorty's ass. Then he asked me to help. That's when I laid it out plainly. If you want my help, you sign power of attorney over to me. Financial, medical, everything. If not, I walk away right now. No drama, no emotion, just terms. He agreed. I hired a lawyer who drove across state lines to that nursing home. I barely had to say anything. I told him what I knew, and he did the rest. He drafted a bulletproof POA stronger than anything Shorty ever had. He also filed the paperwork to revoke Shorty's authority entirely. In that moment, the balance of power shifted. Quietly, legally, irreversibly. Shorty didn't know it yet, but his world was already collapsing. The first thing I did was disappear. Not physically, but on paper. Nothing I touched had my name on it. I opened a Google account in my dad's name, got a Google Voice number, opened a P.O. box in his town, filed mail forwarding, pulled his full credit report. Then I went to his bank. Small town, friendly faces, familiar routines. And that's where Shorty made his fatal mistake. For 13 months, 13 straight months, Shorty had walked into the same bank branch twice a week and withdrawn cash. All of it, thousands of dollars at a time. Every single transaction was signed, notarized, documented. My dad received about $5,000 a month in disability and Social Security. Shorty drained it all. I sat in that bank lobby for hours, going line by line through statements, highlighting, photographing, cross-referencing. I learned the patterns, the timing, the amounts. By the end, the number was staggering. Over $130,000 in cash gone. And that didn't include the credit cards or the destroyed house. Shorty hadn't just stolen. He documented his crimes for me. I went back to the house with the locksmith. When the first door opened, the smell rolled out like a living thing. Thick, wet, rotten. We both gagged. Inside, it was worse than imagined. I tipped the locksmith extra, not out of generosity, but shame. Then I called the police. I told them I was power of attorney, that there were vehicles on the property that didn't belong to my father, and I wanted them removed. 2 tow trucks arrived. The driver asked me, "You know Shorty?" I looked him dead in the eye. "Do you?" He laughed nervously. "Yeah. He's an asshole." I leaned in. "If you see him, tell him Munwam is coming for him." The color drained from his face. He understood exactly what that meant. The trucks were towed. Just like that, Shorty lost transportation, storage, and income. When everyone left, I sat on the carport steps as the sun went down. Inside the house, I could hear movement. Rats, roaches, life thriving in filth. I smelled like decay. I was exhausted, and I was furious. That was the moment I asked myself the only question that mattered. Do I walk away, or do I finish this? I chose to finish it. That night, I Googled restraining orders. The restraining order was easier than expected. The judge listened. He saw the evidence. He granted it. Temporary at first, but enough to put fear into Shorty's bones. Then I hired a biohazard cleanup company. $7,000. Worth every cent. They found my father's dog, mummified, under pizza boxes. They sent me photos. I printed them, and I brought them to my father. From every angle. That wasn't revenge. That was truth. And from that point on, there was no going back. Shorty had no idea what was coming. But I did, and I was just getting started. Once I crossed that line, once the restraining order was in motion and the house was finally opened up, something fundamental changed inside me. The hesitation was gone. The moral debate was over. This was no longer about curiosity or closure. This was about control, about consequences, about making sure that for once in my life, the people who had caused the damage were the ones who felt powerless. The biohazard crew worked fast, brutally fast. They didn't ask questions. They didn't react emotionally. They just documented everything and shoveled it out like the crime scene it was. Room by room, years of neglect were stripped away. Rotting furniture, mold-soaked clothes, trash fused to the floor. The smell lingered even after they left, like the house itself didn't want to be saved. When they found my father's dog, what little restraint I had left snapped. The animal had died alone, trapped under boxes and garbage, forgotten the same way my sister and I had been. I stared at the photos longer than I should have, not in grief, but in focus. This wasn't just emotional neglect. This was criminal. While they cleaned, I worked. I became meticulous, obsessive. Every night after my own family went to sleep, I sat at the table building timelines, spreadsheets, folders, bank withdrawals, dates, amounts, locations. I mapped out 13 months of theft, like a forensic accountant with nothing left to lose. Every cash withdrawal Shorty made had his signature. Every signature was notarized. He hadn't even tried to be subtle. He thought power of attorney meant immunity. He thought no one would ever look. That arrogance was going to cost him everything. When I went to the police station, I expected resistance. Small towns protect their own. I was prepared for dismissal, excuses, that familiar condescending tone people use when they think you don't understand the system. The detective told me it was a domestic matter, that Shorty had power of attorney, that everything he did was legal. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I just slid the statute across the desk with the relevant sections highlighted and followed it. With the folder, thick, heavy, undeniable, I watched his confidence evaporate page by page. The photos of the house, the bank records, the running total of stolen cash, the credit report showing tens of thousands in debt. When I sat down and told him I'd wait for a case number, the room went quiet. 30 minutes later, he came back apologizing. That apology tasted better than anything I'd imagined for 30 years. Court was even better. Shorty walked in alone. No lawyer. Dirty, disorganized, untied shoes. He looked exactly like someone who had spent years leeching off another man's life and never once planned for accountability. When the judge asked for proof, I handed over the folder. When he asked if the police were involved, I gave him the case number. The moment the judge stopped the hearing and told Shorty he needed a lawyer was the moment I knew this was permanent. The restraining order wasn't just granted, it was granted for life. There was no appeal that mattered. No version of reality where Shorty could touch my father, the house, or the money again. From there, I erased him systematically. I removed his access to accounts, changed addresses, opened new ones, transferred funds so there was never more than $100 sitting anywhere he could find. I sold the house to a flipper for enough to cover the mortgage and nothing more. No equity, no inheritance, nothing to fight over. Probate only matters when there's something left. I made sure there wasn't. My father died believing he still owned a home. Shorty died financially long before the court date. I found the life insurance policies next. They were active, paid. Still listing my stepmother as beneficiary. She was dead. Legally, that meant there was no beneficiary at all. My power of attorney didn't allow me to change beneficiaries, but it did allow me to assign them. So I did. My sister and me, irrevocable, locked, unchangeable without all of us agreeing. It was clean, legal, final. I didn't tell my father any of this. The only things he ever truly understood were that Shorty was gone and that his dog had been left to die. Everything else happened quietly, behind the scenes, where he couldn't interfere or undo it with guilt or sentimentality. He had already made his choices decades ago. This was simply the accounting. When he died, I was there. He was buried in a national cemetery far away from everyone who ever used him. No service, no gathering, no forgiveness ceremony. His urn was purple, the color he hated most. That detail wasn't an accident. Some people don't deserve peace. They deserve distance. Shorty, meanwhile, lost everything. His kids, his home, his access, his freedom. He was arrested just after midnight and sat in jail while the case crawled forward. The prosecutor told me it could take years. I told her that was perfect. Uncertainty is its own sentence. I sleep well now. Not because I'm cruel, not because I'm heartless, but because for the first time in my life, the damage didn't go unanswered. By the time the courtroom day arrived, I had spent months meticulously preparing. Every bank statement, every photograph of the hoarded house, every document of theft and mismanagement was organized into folders and spreadsheets. I knew the stakes. I knew that this was the moment when years of rage, injustice, and meticulous planning would collide into one perfect crescendo. My hands shook not from fear, but from anticipation. This was the moment justice would be served. Shorty arrived looking exactly how I imagined he would. Disheveled, overconfident, and oblivious to the storm about to engulf him. His shoes untied, his shirt wrinkled, hair greasy, and an air of arrogance that would have been laughable if it hadn't been so infuriating. My pulse quickened as I watched him swagger into the courtroom, utterly unprepared for the force he was about to face. He had assumed the world owed him, and for the first time in his life, he was about to discover the opposite. The judge began the proceedings, asking questions I had anticipated and prepared for. I calmly presented my evidence, folder after folder, timeline after timeline, photos of the house, pictures of the mummified dog, bank withdrawals totaling over $130,000, and proof of financial mismanagement that no one could deny. I watched Shorty squirm, the realization slowly dawning that he had overplayed his hand. He thought he was untouchable. He thought greed would shield him. But he had never accounted for precision, planning, and the quiet rage of someone who had been wronged for decades. The judge halted the proceedings at one point, looking at Shorty and asking if he had a lawyer. The smirk faded from Shorty's face. For the first time, the court was no longer just a building. It was a stage where the culmination of 30 years of pain, neglect, and meticulous strategy would unfold. The temporary restraining orders, the revocation of his POA, the redirection of life insurance and assets. All of it came together seamlessly. He had no escape. He had no allies. He had no defense against the storm he had helped create. When the final ruling was made permanent restraining order, complete financial control shifted to me as POA, and criminal investigations for elder abuse opened. I felt a release unlike anything I had imagined. All the years of sleepless nights, anger, and resentment were validated. The moral satisfaction was overwhelming. This wasn't just revenge, it was poetic justice. Shorty had lost everything he had counted on: his stolen income, his free house, his perceived power, and the illusion that he could act with impunity. I ensured my father remained in the dark about most of the machinations. He only knew about the restraining order and the resolution of his living situation, which meant he avoided the psychological torment of seeing the full scale of Shorty's downfall. Yet, every time I visited him, I could see relief in his eyes. He was safe, cared for, and finally protected. The house that had been a shrine to greed and neglect was gone, and any future claims Shorty could have made were rendered impossible. The cherry on top came months later. My father passed away peacefully in June, surrounded by dignity and care. I oversaw his final arrangements personally. His urn, deliberately purple, the color he hated most, rested in a quiet national cemetery far from the chaos Shorty had created. No fanfare, no mourners from the family who had caused so much pain. Only quiet respect and justice. Shorty, on the other hand, was arrested in July, facing 10 years for felony elder abuse. Unsure when or if he would ever regain stability, custody, or credibility, I sat back after it was all done, reflecting on the years of struggle, the planning, and the meticulous execution. Justice had been served, not out of cruelty, but because it was right, fair, and necessary. Shorty had been given every opportunity to behave decently, to act responsibly, and to respect the people who had once been family. He chose greed, laziness, and malice. The consequence was inevitable, and watching it unfold was deeply satisfying, almost cathartic. The lessons were clear. Life isn't always fair, but when injustice persists, strategic action, patience, and clarity of purpose can restore balance. I had transformed decades of betrayal into a carefully orchestrated symphony of justice. My father's dignity was preserved, Shorty's arrogance shattered, and I finally slept with the profound satisfaction of closure. Sometimes revenge isn't about rage, it's about justice, protection, and reclaiming what was stolen. The world might be unfair, but when you combine patience, planning, and determination, even decades of wrongs can be corrected. If this story gave you chills or a sense of satisfaction, smash that like button and share in the comments. What's the most satisfying revenge you've ever witnessed? And of course, subscribe for more stories where justice is finally served.